my deal was I have fluctuations, in the water chemistry, no matter where you go in the world. How do I put together a simple system that gives me healthy water?
Yeah, that's what most
Water,
people want. Give me a
yeah,
simple system that gives me
simple
healthy
stuff. I
water.
want to be able to take a shower without being bombarded with chlorine.
What is clean, healthy water, and how do we get it? If you're anything like me, my name is Alex Corey. You're probably a little concerned, frustrated, or just curious about the state of water quality. And we seem to be having a new natural disaster in the United States, and probably the world, every week at this point, with Hurricane Helene hitting Asheville, where I just came from, and the watershed getting destroyed there. I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, with the Cape Fear right behind me, and 1,200 times the allowable limit of forever chemicals, PFOA and PFOS, and all these things you hear about making news headlines, and microplastics ending up in human tissue, and disrupting hormones, and just generally contaminants hitting water, glyphosate, atrazine in the groundwater. If you're in a city, maybe you're affected by chlorine or rust or heavy metal, or just concerned that it doesn't taste that good, doesn't smell that good, and you don't feel that good after drinking it or after it hits you. Today's episode with Owen is to demystify all the different water technologies and figure out how to get clean, healthy water, and how to not only remove the toxins from water, but how to help our bodies repair and heal faster by using water. So I have a real rough framework, but essentially I just love the passion and the level of biochemical, all different aspects of water we went over last time we chatted.
Yep.
And I just wanted to get it recorded because I've found that water is the last piece, the probably most important piece, but the last piece I came to for a health journey. But it
Yep.
something has to happen for people to pay attention to it. There has to be a spill, an explosion, a family member has to get something dramatic has to happen for most people to change. So I
Sure.
wanted to just give a real broad framework because whenever we chatted, I was inspired, and it's actually that's why I love the health field. Is you
Yep.
run into conversations and you get inspired, and that gives you the energy to do something. So I enjoyed that.
Yep.
If you could just give a brief background as to your various careers,
Yep.
engineering knowledge bases, where you're coming from, and how you landed at water.
Yeah. So water, very interesting, but um, I had educated myself originally to be an attorney, and after a little bit of law school, I hated law. So I said, well, you know what? Computer science is really going well. I'll just go get a degree in that. So I went off to Johns Hopkins, uh, got that degree, and started working in, believe it or not, artificial intelligence like 50 years ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what time frame is this?
Yeah, yeah. So I did that for about 15 years. And then during the tail end of that, my father, who had uh, several engineering degrees, sort of a mentor to me, understanding logic. Things have to make sense, or they don't. So it's like um, I started doing carbon dioxide sequestration out of power plants, and what fascinated me at the time about the power plant was our number two operating cost was water treatment. And when I looked at the water treatment, I've got all these chemical engineers together, and they explained exactly what was going on. And I said, that doesn't make sense to me. And then I started studying water treatment and found that what we had been doing, had been done for 50 years without change. I said, this is ridiculous, because I have it coming from the AI background. I knew that, change was a weekly thing, and it's like water, it wasn't. And that was back then, water was essentially free from your tap. It was a gift, to have somebody come up and plumb a line from the street to your house. So you could use all the water that you wanted with reckless abandon. um, when I started studying water and how to treat it, uh, I did what everybody else did. I started designing water purification systems to meet EPA regulations. Then I found, uh, geez, these guys at EPA really don't know that much about water, yet they're setting regulations, and
Yeah, it's a black pill. I think most of us who even like tiptoe into the field by accident come across, and you're like, uh-oh, there's no one guarding this.
well, it's kind of funny because I started off, dealing with mercury as a contaminant, and the more and more I researched it, the more and more dramatic it became, that you know nobody understood that a minute amount of toxin is devastating to the human cell, especially if you get it every single day. And it's just like, whoa, because like mercury is accumulative, it doesn't go away, it just keeps building up in your tissues. So then I ended up going around, lecturing on mercury, frankly, to the Office of Science and Technology, EPA. I used to do sessions for them, testified in front of Congress a couple of times, on the toxicity of mercury, wrote a paper on it.
What brought you to mercury specifically?
So, believe it or not, it was, I have a son missing a left hand. And, I tracked that back to contamination via amalgam fillings. And that level of toxin, especially for, a pregnant woman in her fifth week of pregnancy, any kind of toxin like that can have devastating effects because the infant at that time has no immune system. They can't fight a toxin. And so I started studying mercury, and I actually, started reading, the data on it, and sort of attacked it like most people do. It's like, oh, coal-fired power plants, we got to stop those babies. And then I had a regulator in Boston, Massachusetts, ask me to take a look at dental waste. And it's like how much mercury can be in dental waste. Well, it represented 77% of all the mercury coming into a sewage treatment plant was from dental waste. 77%.
That's a big mover.
So then I looked at historically what the dental market had purchased for mercury. And they were doing and averaging for decades 70 tons a year. 70. So it's like, oh, well, power plants, coal-fired power plants at the time were doing about 34 tons. So they were double. They were double the volume of all the coal-fired power plants in the United States.
I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around that. That's such a huge difference in, you don't think of a dental office being that scale of industry because, it's just a little dental office, but they're everywhere and so many of them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's about almost 200,000 offices in the United States alone. So anyway, I devised a little device to get the mercury out of dental waste. And because I had been lecturing, I used to get calls from, I sat on the board of dental waste at EPA established a board to set standards, so I helped set those standards. And then I had to go state to state to state to state, helping them write regulatory language. And as a result of all that effort, I ended up with my product doing about a little over 80% of the US market, and then recapturing the waste, putting it back into liquid mercury. So I mean, it was recycled, all of it. So it became unarguable when people said, there's not that much in dental waste. It's like, guys, I'm recovering it. I know exactly how much is in there. So Yeah, it ended up that I ended up getting several awards because I had removed more mercury than anybody else on the planet from dental waste. So then the next topic I got into was arsenic, and now let me go back to mercury. What happened in mercury was when you start looking at toxins and you start thinking about their toxic level, all of a sudden you start getting into, hey, I got to start thinking at the molecular level. Like an ion of mercury sitting in solution. If the solution, if you took like Fenway Park and filled it 3 times with water and put a grain of salt that represented mercury, that's what you're targeting as toxic. So
Follow road.
yeah, it's that amount alone causes damage. So it's not like you have to drink a thermometer full of mercury. Um, then it was pathways. Like you literally can swallow a thermometer of mercury and have very little damage because your digestive system is the best sewage treatment plant on the planet. All right. However, if you breathe the vapor, because mercury has a low vapor pressure, it tends to vaporize pretty quickly. You bypass your digestive system, and now you're passing mercury into your blood directly through your lungs. So you're getting super toxic. So that, once I had accomplished all of that, I started looking at arsenic. And, arsenic was another one of these things that, boy, you got to read a lot before you really figure out why it is toxic. So now you start getting into cellular biology. And at that time, my background, I had learned a lot about chemistry because I had my own lab. I had a couple of PhDs working in the lab for me. So, I just learned how to speak their language. Then I found out Stanford University had all their chemistry courses and cellular biology courses online for free. You could just audit them. So I did for about 10 years and went through every single one of them. So now I read papers, I'd say on average, maybe 3 research papers a day, and I correlate research papers because I always read the paper. If it makes common sense, then I'm okay with it. If somebody points to a data point that I don't know where that data point came from, I research the data point. So I look for the, okay, all the references they had in their study, I'll cross-reference all those links because it's so easy today. So I chase stuff down. I've become kind of a research fanatic, on water, and it came into the point where as I stated earlier, you start doing your development like everybody else, and EPA was my driver for reaching certain levels. Then when I had started to understand how cells act as a carrier of nutrients and toxins in and out of cells, how that process works, you find out that purity of water is not the problem. Sure, you got a couple of toxins in there, but your cells really don't like to absorb water that's dirty or not consistent with kind of the way nature developed water. There's a recent study out there showing water softeners, because I got a kick out of this. So last night I'm watching TV, and on the news they're announcing in Arizona, dementia is a bigger problem than the other 49 states.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, so I correlate that because 2 weeks ago a study was showing that the use of water softeners cause early onset dementia. And it's just like, well, there's the sodium. You're exchanging calcium, which is a major cell signaling ion, with sodium that's not. And I always tell people like so many people have reverse osmosis systems under their sink, thinking, oh, look at this high purity water. And I said, well, an RO system, it does. It creates really high purity water. There's a lot wrong with RO in terms of it really doesn't filter anything out. It just,
Reverse osmosis.
yeah, it just separates things. So you get clean water, but the rest goes right down your drain and back into the aquifers. So
Right.
you're just kicking the can down the road. But the other thing is when you're drinking RO water and you're taking RO water into your cells, you're putting water into the cell that doesn't conduct electricity, because that's what RO water is, non-conductive. And that's how you measure it. As oh, look at this. It's non-conductive.
I call that dead,
Yeah,
essentially. So that people
yeah,
ask what living water is. Well, and I was like, well, it's the opposite of dead water.
yeah, yeah.
Bioavailable.
If you can't conduct electricity in the cell, you're going to get sick or die. Period. End of story. Because it's just like, you always look at these, synapse. Everybody talks, oh, connectors and synapse, and it's like, well, take a look at what that really is. Those are electrical chemical signals, and they go down pathways. And if you disrupt that, everything starts to fall apart. Unfortunately, the immune system falls apart first, and you got a weak immune system because you have low energy coming out of your cells because you've disrupted that energy. You're going to get all kinds of diseases.
Yeah, this is the tricky part, I think, when I initially came in the water, and probably for most people, because I still get overwhelmed and it's been 3 years, there's so many flavors. There's the, hey, I would just like clean water. Oh, reverse osmosis. This takes care of all of these new industrial chemicals. It's well marketed. It's clean water. But the distinction that was hard for me is clean doesn't mean healthy.
Right. Yep.
Right.
That was, that's when the light goes on. It's like, super clean water. Yeah, that doesn't really help you uh, not only stay well, but certainly if you have a disease, it
Right.
doesn't help you mitigate it.
Yeah. There's no restorative nature. There's no immediate use. Could you explain? We jumped over a whole bunch, but since we're here, you mentioned on our last time we spoke about the mitochondrial, the energy required to process. Can you explain the process by which water actually gets into a cell?
So yeah, you have a cell. We think that is kind of osmosis, that water goes through a cell wall via osmosis, and it really doesn't. There are these in the cell. Because you've seen. I always tell people. So you've seen COVID-19. You see all these little branches coming out of cells, and the virus attaches to like a little stem coming out of the cell, and then it passes through the cell. Well, what allows it to pass through is these aquaporins in the cell, and water going in and out of the cell uses aquaporin. So water comes into the cell, then you've got hydrogen and oxygen that mitochondria uses to convert that to energy. And then it creates, carbon dioxide, which carries back to the lungs for discharge, and if you disrupt that energy process, all within that cell, because you're sitting now with RNA communicating to DNA to create proteins and enzymes that your body's calling for at that particular point in time. If you disrupt that and start changing that energy level, you disrupt that whole process. And if one of these proteins, or enzymes is calling for an immune response, it may or may not happen, or happen to a lower level than you really need. So, it's very, very problematic. The other thing is, as you're converting this energy, you're creating these superoxide anions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, those are carried through the blood, and if you have an immune response, those superoxide anions have to be in the blood to convert that to hyperchlorous acid. Okay, it goes from peroxide, through a catalytic process, it goes into hyperchlorous acid. That HOCl, hydrogen, oxygen, and free chlorine is what actually kills bacteria and virus. So if that process isn't happening appropriately, you can't fight disease very well because you don't have the killer product in the bloodstream to be able to attack it.
Yeah, people will know that molecule from if they have a hydrogen water or any ionizer, and you have a salt tank, you can produce uh,
Yep,
that ion, and that's what we use for sort of non-toxic disinfection.
yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Could we
Yeah,
go
I
back
do.
to just so I more clearly understand the why we need living water, why we need the conductivity in
Yep,
that intracellular process?
yep. Well, you need the conductivity because all of this is working, essentially on these pathways that are, you've got all this cell signaling occurring. Um, it's almost like, I'll give you an example. If mercury comes in as a toxin, the pathways are all these sulfohydryl pathways. Mercury chelates to
Binds.
sulfohydryl,
Yeah.
blocks the pathway. So whatever cell signaling is required is not happening.
So the traffic lights aren't working on the highway.
Yeah, it's super disruptive. And that's true of most toxins, that they disrupt that process. And that process is that's what's going to make you really sick.
Yeah. And the issue I have, or the overwhelming part in literature and social media is people always say, hey, the dosage makes the poison. You're like, don't worry about it until it bioaccumulates to this level. You have bigger things to worry about. And I have kind of always had a problem with that. I'm like, some of these things are really bad at any level.
Well, so there are some diseases you don't want to start.
Right.
It's like keep them at bay. I mean, cancer is a great example. It's like uh, cancer just doesn't happen overnight. You know, it requires a long time of a body not functioning properly, and it's like once you've got it, it's really hard to get rid of. As most people know, but so the idea is to keep it at bay, and you keep it at bay with a strong immune system.
Right. Yeah, prevention is much easier than treatment for sure.
Yep, yep.
So you
Well, that's
were from,
that's one of my things right now in this whole thing about healthy water. It's like we have far too much disease for a lot of reasons. It's not just mercury in water or arsenic in water, or drinking water that's too high in purity. You're getting toxins that we're breathing every day. We're getting toxins. The stuff we have in food is almost frightening.
yeah,
Almost frightening. And I always tell people, like, I always buy organic. And I go, so tell me, what is organic food? Let's define what allows you to stick the word organic on a label,
yeah.
you know, lack of a pesticide or a fertilizer. That's pretty much it.
I mean, there's plenty of OMRI approved pesticides. So I did
Yep.
organic farming for 10 years. And when you see the process, this isn't to discourage people from buying organic. That's
It's,
a
be- it's
that's
better than the
better,
processed.
correct. But
Yeah.
the the allowable things, when you realize what farmers have to contend with, organic usually just means generally recognized as safe, right? There's
Yep.
no like
Yep.
short term, you're not ingesting a serious nervous system agent, but some of them are still sketchy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you don't want to eat without washing or without even emulsifying. Most of these are oil-based pesticides and herbicides and
Yep.
fungicides, so you need some way to dissolve the oil on the produce. But yeah, I came to water because it was so much easier,
Yep.
almost, and the level of toxicity. Like if I pull someone's water report from Environmental Working Group, and you're in Arizona, and the thing that always pops out whenever I'm looking at anything in Arizona, as you mentioned, is the ridiculous level of arsenic right at the top of the list, up to like 1,000 times. And I was like, how
Oh,
is
yeah.
this possible?
Yep. Yep. No, and people ignore it.
Yeah.
Even municipalities, they have a 10 part per billion, um, level, even though the studies showed that at 10 parts per billion, it's still toxic.
Yeah.
But if they went to the recommended safety level via research, that was set at 3 parts per billion. But EPA, and this is what people have to understand about EPA, they do things from an economic fashion. And it's just like, hey, at 3 parts, 77%, of all your treatment systems, and I think there's like 58,000 of them, municipalities would have to put in treatment. And that would have been too costly.
So you can't bankrupt the water treatment plants.
Right. So they said, oh, if we bring it to 10, maybe 20% have to treat. So that's what they did, and, they had things like, drinking arsenic causes cancer, and I said, no, it doesn't. It does not cause cancer. What it does is it makes your immune response, okay, you are more likely to get cancer because it has blocked through, and again, we get right back into the cellular communication. It blocks the communication against the production of enzymes that fight cancer cells.
So it is not a carcinogen. It is inhibiting the repair process.
Precisely.
Okay.
Yep.
But so, to most people, that distinction is almost irrelevant, right? You're just like, hey, this is contributing to your body not being able to engage in its full healing capacity.
Right.
Because the human body, the thing that keeps me in health, and I've tried multiple things, and the thing that always fascinates me about health is the more research we do and the more modalities people discover and try, the healing power, the machine of the human body is still the most miraculous thing I've ever come across. Keeps me coming back.
Well, I always look at the human body and what it does, and I'm researching it all the time. And the deeper I get, the more marveled I am.
Yeah.
It's just like, God, I know so little.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then you go into water and you're like, I thought I knew anything about metabolism. Like, it's a whole different I thought it was just water, right? I have to everyone. It's just H2O, and you're just like that. I mean, if you spend any amount of time in it, you go all the way down the rabbit hole.
It's crazy what water does and what the human cell does to water.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
crazy.
Actually, go into that a little bit if you could. What does the human cell do to water? What is, let's go, let's do what the human cell does to water. Touch on the filtration that you invented, so that I just found Pure Way rather incidentally, but if we could start on the what you designed and why you designed it.
So, there's all kinds of different design issues with putting a treatment system together in water. But I had seen that, because I've been doing this now for almost 40 years. When people design water treatment systems, like I said, hey, I did arsenic. Hey, I did mercury. It's like a toxin at a time, and it's like, oh, I got this great resin that takes out mercury. Got this great resin that takes out arsenic. And it's like, but if you use the resin, the water tastes lousy, so I need a carbon system on it. It only works at pH 4.5, so I got to adjust the pH down and then bring it back up, and you end up with systems that are so complicated for people to use. You need an engineering degree,
right?
I just said, God, there's got to be a better way. And then overkilling, I said there's a function for reverse osmosis. If all you have is water that has salt in it, or you're making semiconductor chips, where you don't want conductivity, perfect. Use an RO. That's the best technology out there for today. That will change, but my deal was, I have fluctuations, in the water chemistry, no matter where you go in the world. How do I put together a simple system that gives me healthy water?
Yeah. That's what most people want. Give me a simple system that gives me
simple stuff.
Water.
I want to be able to take a shower without being bombarded with chlorine.
Right.
It's like, so, the idea was a 3-housing system. And I ran into this research that NASA had done, with a water company that hadn't really done anything with their end product. And it was to take these aluminum nanofibers. And the nanofiber, each one was like 3 nanometers in diameter. And to put that in perspective, it's like 50,000 of those wound together is the diameter of a single human hair. So it had an enormous amount of surface area. So I looked at the data on it, and it turned out that one, it had enormous capacity because of all the different sites. So with that enormous surface area, it had about 100 to 200 times the dirt holding capacity of a filter you might get at Home Depot, or Lowe's, or whatever. The spiral, typical spiral wound type filters. So that was pretty good. The other data that fascinated me was there was almost no back pressure required. So I actually ended up buying a company that was folding, because they were taking that and putting it into a paper substrate so you could pleat it into a filter. And so I bought that company, and I said, okay, so now we're going to modify this technology. Because if I have low pressure and I have high capacity, I can monkey with those two areas from a design perspective. So what I do is, I'm able to modify the outside surface of the filter, by having a little dissolvable pack, and I can, the minute you turn it on, the pack dissolves, and then I filter out what I just put in that pack, and that becomes a permanent part of the filter. Okay, so so in essence, is if I put in a like a thing that would target mercury, like a little sulfur compound, I'd filter that out, and for the next year, that filter is going to target mercury. Okay, then there's a return core, so you have water flows from the outside in through the filter, and then it returns up, to the head. Well, the low pressure that I have, I can steal some of that pressure and put product inside the center core. So now each filter, I have the native function of the filter, I have the external core and the internal core to play with. It gives me such variability to be able to solve problems right across the planet. And I have 3 housings, all backed up, in a series. So, we're doing things. I mean, we've got, our first filter is designed to, cut bacteria down, filter particles out, and then as the water is being returned, I condition the water. So what I'm doing, because I don't like softeners for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, this was the part that amazed me at the start. I was like, how are you letting the healthy minerals through? But when you do that, you tend to get limescale and all of the hard water and all of the things that people kind of go, ugh, on the other end. Like, how are you dealing with that?
Yep. So what I'm doing right now is I use it's kind of a silica phosphate bead. Okay. And what happens is calcium will actually, as the water's flowing across the bead, calcium links to both the phosphate and the silica, creating calcium phosphonate or calcium silicate. Once it's in that form, it can no longer create little spots on your silverware anymore, because it can no longer produce calcium carbonate.
Right.
So the benefit of that is you're still getting your calcium, and the phosphonate and the silicate is also healthy for you.
So you're still retaining the ion, that conductivity potential, but you're removing the obnoxious part that downstream leads to.
Exactly. Most people don't know what softening really is. I mean, they just go, "Oh, the soap is so much better in my hair." Well,
right.
All you have to do is, kill the calcium carbonate side of that, and the water will feel like it's softened. But we have calcium in the water, just like the input water, where if you soften it, you have no calcium in your water.
Right.
So, that's what we do in the first column. The second column is we refer to that as a biofilter. that is going to, although it does other things because we've got carbon dust inside it, but that'll get a log 9 reduction of bacteria, log 7 of virus, and log 5 of cysts and spores.
Can you tell everyone what those three things, what does log mean?
Okay, so a log it's just the exponent. So log 9 is 99.7 more nines
It's a lot of
removal.
nines.
In perspective, that's like if you had like a billion CFU count, you'd have one that would get through, which is your margin of analytical error.
Right.
So, we're removing essentially all bacteria. So, which means for me, if you get a boil order, you can ignore it.
Yeah, this is the video of Rob, one of the owners of
Yep.
Pure Way and the guy who I met initially. The video that I just put up where I was like, wow, I would even feel uncomfortable doing that, is he drank from the little mini bottle right from Lake Lure. And for
Yep.
anyone who doesn't know where that is, that's the lake in Western North Carolina, right outside Asheville, that probably got devastated the
Huge.
most by
Yep.
Hurricane Helene, to the point of, and the entire village ended up in the lake. Propane
Yep.
tanks, gas tanks, literally every chemical you would find on a chemical report
Yep.
is in that lake, and he just drank from it without
Yep.
any, like, it's a life straw that
Yep.
you can bring to a stream, plus all of the industrial contaminants, which is the part that I had not heard of before.
Yep.
People have to get UV filters on a
Yep.
well to just kill all of the living things. They're still there, you're just killing them, but yours actually traps them.
We do. We trap them. And the way we trap them, if you think about it, so most filtration, I call it the art of little holes. Because you got nanofiltration, microfiltration, ultrafiltration, reverse osmosis, and microfiltration. So it's sort of like having a concrete wall, and you're pushing water 90-degree angle typically at the concrete wall. RO, they change the angle, and they call that the contact angle. Otherwise, they just destroy their own membranes. So we'll filter out particles based on their particle size. Okay, and all your toxins, all of them are going to have a certain size profile, which is why RO removes so much, because
Right.
everything's removed. It's 0.005 micron removal. Ultrafiltration would be 0.05. Nothing much survives or gets through RO membranes, at least on a second pass. But the problem with that is the more you pressurize water against a filter, the more damage you do.
Right.
And the more back pressure you create. The more back pressure you create, well, that's a problem in somebody's home, because you flush the toilet when you're in the shower and all of a sudden the water stops.
Right.
It's like not fun. So what we're doing, the way, and I said, you have to envision, instead of a concrete barrier with little holes, we have like a forest. And what you have are, trees sitting down with branches coming out, and they're all like 3 nanometers apart, each filament. So when water hits it, it's passing through it with very minimal, back pressure. But essentially what you have is a highly positively charged branch coming through. So anything with a negative charge is going to be picked up. That defines most bacteria, most virus. And then what we do is the forest, like each one of these, we layer the material, okay, 32 layers deep. And then we make sure that none of those fibers align with each other. This is just all in the manufacturing. So it creates this real torturous path, but everything still flows. But what it does is, as things flow, they're turning these corners, they're hitting the charge. And, even though we have a 3 nanometer distance between it, the charge overlaps the entire diameter of the pore. So everything gets picked off by the time it's going through, almost regardless of flow rate.
How would that be different for people who probably have seen water ads and being in the water world? I get it. You wouldn't believe my Instagram feed. The advertisements for every sort of carbon, usually like granulated activated carbon technology. How is
Sure.
that mechanism or how is that filtration different than someone's fridge filter, a Berkey, any of that kind of stuff?
So everybody should understand activated carbon. It's a adsorbent and absorbent both. Okay, and it is a charged surface, and they have inside carbon. There are things called either macro or micro pores, and those pores they have a charge, and they're pulling stuff into the pore as water passes through. That process usually takes 5 to 10 minutes on a standard activated carbon core.
Mm-hmm.
So you need a lot of activated carbon to do a decent job, or a very low flow rate, which is why you see carbon used in refrigerator filters. If refrigerator filters were doing a gallon a minute, they wouldn't be using carbon.
Right.
Because it would be a big filter. Probably a 2.5 by 10-inch filter would be required to get a gallon per minute. So carbon's it's a great technology for making water taste good because it absorbs chlorine and chloramine so effectively, which tastes horrible. We use carbon in the paper where we've created that torturous path. There's also carbon granules all through it as well in a powdered form, which gives you enormous surface area. But we're still using, in that case, we're still using micropores, inside each carbon bead, so to speak. And so we're copying that. But carbon is also it's almost like a backbone food group for biological growth.
Mm.
So if you've ever changed a refrigerator, you'll notice it's pretty slimy.
Yeah.
And that's because it's been housing it's like a condo complex for bacteria. So if carbon is not followed typically by UV, you've got a ton of bacteria. And if you don't believe me and you have an under the sink RO, read your documentation about how frequently you should shock the storage tank, which nobody does.
Right.
And storage tanks, in about 30 days, the CFU count on a storage tank will be maybe somewhere between 300,000 and 1 million colony forming units in it. Most of it would be heterotrophic bacteria, which is harmless, but you just don't know what's in it. So you should be disinfecting those tanks. Because if you had a shot of E. coli, it's growing in your tank.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty moist, dark environment.
Yep.
Yeah. At 72 degrees.
Yep. Yeah, and it has it's a pressurized tank, so it has this bladder in it, and that's also a food source for bacteria because that's rubber. So it's like you look at this stuff and you go, oh my God. So we filter when stuff goes through, we've trapped the bacteria. Okay, so and then what we did is inside when I talked about our little packets, we're filtering out some small silver particles. Silver kind of mimics the same function that a UV light would without an energy requirement, and it doesn't dissipate over time. It puts out the same electron field all the time. And so what we do is, as we're trapping it, we're exposing it, to the silver particles, and the bacteria is dead. So when you change one of our filters that's been in place, it's not slimy. That was another one of my.
There's no growth through. There's no formation. It was already neutralized.
Yep, we stop everything right in place. So,
anyone who takes colloidal silver in the winter to prevent sinus infections will understand what the power of silver.
Silver's like it's great. It's like I'm not a big guy for drinking it. Because again, you get into the electrochemistry of the cell. Well, now you've got an optimizer in there. Do you really want that side of the formula?
Right.
It's like
balance is the point, right? Homeostasis, not teeter-tottering on either side.
Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, then we do follow up with a carbon filter, but again, our carbon filter We've modified that to increase its surface area by using less binding materials. Because when you make a carbon block, which is what everybody's doing now, you make a carbon block, and that carbon block usually takes a lot of pressure to get through it because the binder, it takes about 30% binding chemistry to hold the block together because it's essentially pressurized and glued. And that glue takes up a bunch of binding sites, because water can't pass through it. So we've managed to put together filters with a 10% binding. So we've got 20% more capacity and better flow characteristics. And then inside the carbon, we also have a packet. So we've got more silver particles in that. Then we can adjust, like I do this, a great example of some of the things we do. Like our standard array will not move out. It won't take out nitrate. There are some areas of the country that have very high nitrate, or as you pointed out, arsenic.
Yeah.
So what we do is center core. So what I can do is put in a nitrate selective resin, in the center core, either the middle or the last filter, and that will remove the nitrate. So, and the water, and the neat thing is because the mechanical filtration that's happened just before the center core, the water quality for me is a known. So when I'm running against an activated carbon, like if you're just taking tap water, and this is, it was one of my beefs, and actually we have refrigerator companies now looking at us, but if you take just standard tap water and you run it against activated carbon, you don't know what's in your tap water, and it fluctuates whether it rained or not the day before.
Whatever is in the reservoir.
Yep. And if there's a lot of particles in it, or a lot of nutrients in it, then that carbon is not going to work as effectively as it has real clean water going through it. Because you're not adding anything to clog that external surface. Because everything's, these little interstitial spaces between the carbon where that water is going to penetrate. So we've pre-filtered it down to the nano level. So the carbon block's going to work better than any carbon block out there, just because we pre-filtered it well.
It's almost like a polish.
Yeah, it's like super polished. So the thing that I'm working on now is like in the last filter element is to work on being able to add certain nutrients from the center core,
like vitamins.
Exactly. Like a vitamin C, D combination, during the winter time, it's like, if you don't want to catch the flu, that's going to do more for you than pretty much anything else on this planet.
So you built a modifiable, customizable to someone's specific contaminants plus health additives, full house water filtration system.
Yeah. We actually have a patent pending. We're doing one for right now for the dental world, where these water lines in dental chairs, they've got a small diameter, low flow rate, high temperature, beautiful for bacterial growth.
Right.
And, a couple of people out there, were putting, essentially what they were doing is just dosing in like iodine, povidone iodine. I'm like, well, that's great, but you're wasting your time, because you can pump that chemical in all day long, but if you don't know what it's going to react with, because you don't understand the incoming water chemistry, that povidone may just react with a bunch of oxidizable constituents, and you've got nothing left to kill bacteria. So the failure rate of those systems is pretty high. And it's why you get boil orders. It's like if you have a municipality that did not calibrate their equipment before they tested the organic load, before they put chlorine in, so it runs from their plant 2 or 3 miles to your house, it's still got an excess of chlorine, so bacteria is not going to proliferate. But if that meter hadn't been calibrated and bacteria and other organics are in that water, they may not have put enough chlorine in, and bingo, boil order.
Yeah.
That's why this stuff happens. So we pre-filter. We have one that right now it's a pre-filter and it releases the same form of iodine that the thyroid gland releases, which nobody's ever been able to do before. Okay, most of your like povidone iodine, most of your iodine, tincture of iodine, they say, oh, it's 10% iodine. Iodine is one of those words they use for all kinds of chemical formations of iodine.
Oh, sure.
So if you looked at povidone iodine, if they say 10%, which is equivalent to 10,000 milligrams per liter, the only biocidal part of that is about 1 to 3 milligrams per liter out of 10,000.
Wow.
The rest of it are binding chemicals. And unfortunately, those binding chemicals are somewhat toxic. They're inflammatory. So it's why a lot of iodine, you might not get infected, but a wound may not heal. So you have to release what's called molecular iodine. And that's the biocidal, virucidal aspect of iodine. And that's what we're releasing into these dental chairs now. And it's a great oral rinse. I mean, it was funny. I was talking to a bunch of the companies and, we got to make sure the dental unit water line is clean. And I said, really? I said, what if you just took, like lake water? I said, what are the military? The military's been doing this now for 70 years. They got their Marines out there in the field and they've got iodine tablets, super low concentration of iodine, molecular iodine in it, but they put a tablet in lake water and drink it.
That's what I used to do when I was hiking in New Hampshire.
They don't try and treat the lake.
Yeah.
It's like, that's your whole design curve is treat the lake, and if somebody has like a unsterilized piece of equipment because it's sitting on a metal tray right in front of you with people walking by, it's like, if somebody uses an unclean piece of equipment and you've put an iodine rinse in their mouth, that patient probably is okay.
Yeah.
You're targeting where the problem really is in the oral cavity.
What's the phrase? Not minimum effective force, right? Don't try to treat the lake.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and this is kind of I've developed this logic, through my father's training and my own experiences in the field, because we tend to, forget where the problem really is.
Right.
And, I do things like, we have products, that we do for like surface disinfection, because that's another thing of mine that's so destructive to human health.
Yeah.
And here we are still using all these, ridiculously toxic chemicals, sticking our head in an oven and spraying this stuff. It's like, you've got to be kidding me. You wonder why you're sneezing, your nose is running. That's called an immune response.
Yeah. When I go into restaurants or businesses in general, just the cleaning products. So like I'm sensitive enough where I walk into a hotel and I'm just like, I get blasted. I'm like, okay, there's got to be a better way.
Yeah. Well, I got a kick out of it. I was doing some consulting for a hotel in Malibu, and they had a very high rate of OSHA claims, and it was really from the cleaning people.
Sure.
Okay, and so I pulled the label and did some research on the cleaning chemical they were using, loaded with quaternary ammonium, and right on the label it says, make sure if you're using this, open the windows. So they've got the proper warning there. But you know how many windows there are in hotel bathrooms?
Yeah, 0.
It's like, you're just like, let's make these guys sick.
Yeah.
So in their case, I just changed them to like a light ozone technology.
I'm seeing ozone everywhere. It's popping up as a great sort of cleaning solution. Ozone and like a hypochlorite ion. So hypochlorous acid, anything like that, or just off gases so quickly. pH changes.
It's it's all solvable. You just have to commit to do it.
I would like to, because that was exactly the amount of in the weeds that I wanted, just for like how this works. Can we broaden and then go back to, okay, so I'm in Wilmington, North Carolina, and we have a DuPont factory upstream. So we have the water report for PFOA, PFOS,
any of the
Yep.
forever chemicals and for microplastics is off like most people think reverse osmosis is the way they have to go because that's what the city said. They're like, hey, we don't have a solution to
Yep.
this. You guys probably want to filter this. Can you go into how's the technology, how's the filter you do with those two things specifically, because they're the ones making headlines right now, like the industrial contaminations from chemical agriculture, from uh, any of the different ways forever chemicals are
Yep.
made, and then from microplastics that are ending up in every single human tissue.
Yeah. So PFAS and PFOA, are the backbone of our product is going to eliminate the vast majority of it. But we also have the all three filters have a carbon load.
Mm-hmm.
Carbons, activated carbons, very good at getting PFOA, PFAS, and PFAS, bound to it. So, and I think we were the first one. We took the home system and had it tested to the 7 ppt limit, and we were the first one to get a NSF 53 certification on it. So that's done. Even our little water bottle takes it out.
PPT meaning parts per trillion.
Parts per trillion.
So
Yeah,
infinitesimal,
that's
tiny.
like
Yeah.
that's super tiny. And what I typically do, because it's like I take a very logical path. So let's say that somebody's in an area like downstream of a chemical plant,
Yeah.
and they're just loading stuff up on you, or even like sewage.
Right.
If they're dumping sewage on the surface, that's loaded with PFAS. So instead of putting a system like we have 2.5 by 10, 2.5 by 20, and a 4.5 by 20. And a 4.5 by 20 handles an awful lot of water. And let's say I've got a 1,500 square foot house, with 2.5 baths in it. It's like, well, 2.5 baths, if everything's running, you're still only doing about 10 gallons a minute max flow. Showers, flushing the toilet, dishwasher running, and it's not a lot of water because most of your faucets are regulated to below 2 parts or 2 gallons per minute.
Mm-hmm.
If you have old plumbing, you may want to put a restrictor, because lower your flow so you don't waste so much water. But what I tell people is put in our large system. It's like, incrementally, it's going to cost you a little more, but not a lot more. But rather than changing filters out every 3 months, put the larger one in and just still do the annual maintenance, because it's just going to be so much easier on you.
Yeah.
Because changing filters is just not it's not like it's not difficult, but it's certainly not fun either.
Yeah, no one wants to do it. Yeah.
No, nobody wants to do it. So it's like, that's why, when I was designing these systems, it's like I wanted filtration systems, and that's where the high capacity came in. I said, I want them to last for a minimum of a year in somebody's house before they have to change them. Because I had, like my house, out in Massachusetts, I've got pretty high iron. I mean, my water unfiltered is brown.
Yeah.
So, I've got a 4.5 by 20 on that house, and the water's pristine clean. I know I've got all the pesticides, pharmaceuticals out of it because I'm in farmland in Massachusetts. So I eliminate all of that. But, I change that filter every 2 years because I'm fortunate enough to have 2 homes. And then I got my house out here, and, my hardness is like 365 parts per million or milligrams per liter, which is super hard water.
Yeah. Interesting. So for people who want, can I just put in something that does, prior, I always had to recommend people go to the sink, do your shower. I didn't find a system that kept the pressure and the volume that actually filtered down to the level we've been talking about. So prior to me discovering this, I always had to be like, yeah, put on a shower and do your drinking water, because you can't get down to the level of all of these tiny little ionic compounds until I found this. So this is easy And I think people like easy, and I really
Yep.
like easy
Yep.
because water should be one of those things where there's too many things that you have to that suck energy on a daily basis when you're buying food at the grocery store or when you're, you know, not feeling well and you're like, what was I around? It's really nice to just have water be done.
Yep. Yep. So the like RO for PFAS, and
Hmm.
this is one of the things I try and teach people. RO doesn't filter it out. Okay, what it does is it splits what they call reject water, that contains all the contaminants that was supposed to be filtered and being discharged right back essentially. And I don't care where they're putting it, whether it's going into your septic system or, whether it's going to a sewage treatment plant. It's going right back into their wastewater, which is going right back into these aquifers.
Mm.
So all we're doing is concentrating that contaminant over time. So I look at RO as not a solution for PFAS because the reject volumes, like you put an under the sink RO, um, that's a very, people try to make very inexpensive systems, inexpensive membranes, or people won't buy an RO system.
Right.
So those typical RO systems are rejecting at least half of the water that's coming in. So for every gallon of treated water, okay, you've also discharged a gallon of contaminated water.
Mm.
So you haven't solved the problem. You've just booted it down the road. And what's going to happen in the aquifers, it will, maybe not in your lifetime, but certainly in your child's lifetime, it'll concentrate the problem in the aquifers to even a more serious issue.
Yeah.
And we have that like the Central Valley in California. We have that just with water softeners, removing, because they're, taking calcium, exchanging it for sodium, but they have a backwash, and that's salt. Okay, so you're going out buying 40 pounds bags of salt to keep regenerating, your softeners. And right now, there's so much salt, going into the aquifers that even the RO systems are having to struggle dealing with the amount of salt. And now a good fraction of wells used in the Central Valley for plants, they can't use them anymore. They're too high in salt.
Wow. Because they needed more problems in agriculture.
Yeah, just what they need, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, let's put more toxins in the water for
That's
plants to
just,
upload.
yeah. But that was actually one of the, this might be a good transition to the molecular thing, like molecular hydrogen, which is a
Yeah,
study of fascination for me over the last 2 years. But
yeah,
one of the things that it does, the studies in agriculture, is increased tolerance to salinity for
yeah,
plants. It's a very interesting molecule. So we went over filtration, right? How to
yeah,
get clean, healthy water. And I am such a water energy nerd, which just
yeah,
means when you're in the water world, that's, the filtration is kind of the boring but necessary part. You're like, how do I not poison myself?
yeah,
And then I think that's where most people stop, which is fine because that's a great baseline. But the how do I help my body heal or accelerate the regeneration, the repair process through the energy aspect that water
sure.
carries is the most fascinating thing, in my opinion, because we're just water beings, like
Yeah,
99% by molecule count. If you just focus on water,
yeah,
lots of things change very quickly.
yeah.
What's your so like go into what you would define like structured water or restructured water as, any of that kind of stuff, the energetics of water.
Yeah, yeah, or functional water. You
Yeah.
know, it's so water, once you apply some energy to it, whether it's through electrodes, cavitation, uh, you know, um, light, heat, the water molecule is going to fracture and break apart. So instead of these H2Os, you end up with hydrogen and oxygen atoms, and then the H2s will tend to bind together to create a hydrogen molecule. So and then they organize themselves. And if you think about the water molecule, we all see you know, the two H's with a certain angle up to the oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, reading literature, initially, it's like, there's nothing you can do about that angle. And, you know, it's like, well, that was wrong.
The hydrogen bonding angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, that's not quite correct. So, if you energize water, you know, what you'll do is line up hydrogen and oxygen. And what's really fascinating is that these are not real stable molecules. I mean, they're swapping oxygens, you know, hydrogen bonding and oxygen bonding is like dynamic, it's fluid. You know, so you end up with things like H3Os.
Yeah.
You know, you also are going to end up with OHs, some hydroxyl groups, and some H2s.
Yeah.
So, you know, for a human cell, you know, first off, all of those organized molecules will pass through aquaporins about 200 times faster than tap water.
Bulk water, dead
Bulk
water,
water
whatever.
tends to agglomerate and create these, you know, these like maybe 5 to 15 water molecules agglomerated together. They're too big to pass through the aquaporin. So the aquaporin will expend energy to reorganize them so they can pass through cleanly and then pass back out, carrying the toxins out of your cell. So, and that's one thing. You have water that's internal to the cell and water that's external to the cell. And the the composition of formation of the hydrogen-oxygen bonds help things pass into the cell and out of the cell more effectively. So essentially, you're able to purify the toxins out of your cells with functional water than you are with tap water, because it's just
this is one of the like interesting points whenever we're talking about living water, and I do this at presentations a lot. Obviously, if you drink tap water, you're still getting water. You're not dying.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So people are just like, what's the difference? And you're like, you're just giving your body more work to do, right? You're wasting a ton of energy. Your body now has to metabolize the water instead of it just sort of getting sucked in by voltage and electrical potential.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's pretty cool. But the interesting thing about you know, like the molecular hydrogen is that you know, we always talk about two things: inflammation and free radicals. You know, everybody knows, oh, free radicals, they're really bad for you. Well, the body produces free radicals constantly, but combine it with some inflammation and the free radical load is problematic. So if you have an H2 and an OH, you know, chemically that's going to create two H2Os and neutralize the radical, you know, because the OH is the free radical.
Right.
So we'll change those free radicals into water. The other thing about healing, you know, when you get down to, I said get down to the atomic level. So if you look at a cut, okay, you just cut yourself, and if you just treat it, you know, I call it sort of with conventional treatment, you're going to get a scar typically. You know, little one or, you know, big one, it depends. But what creates that scarring is the inflammation. Okay, because the skin doesn't line up properly. One side's more inflamed than the other, and as it's healing, one may heal a little faster. And so now those skin cells aren't in alignment anymore, and you can see that misalignment. So if you do that with things that are anti-inflammatory, that is not povidone iodine, because the binder chemicals are inflammatory. Okay, they'll kill the bacteria and viruses sitting on that wound, but it's not going to give you one that's going to heal scar-free. But if you use like a molecular iodine, okay, or if you use things like HOCl, you'll find that the scarring is really hard to find.
Yeah.
And that's because it's real simple. So then you take what you can see, take it down to the molecular level and start lighting cells up. It's like, you know, it blows your mind, because what you can see is, you know, it's virtually nothing compared to when you break down the molecular level. You know, I always ask people, because I mean, you'll never remember when I tell you. It's like, I want you to go down and see how many water molecules, okay, just water molecules are in a single drop of water. Okay. Then think, for every one of those, multiply that by 2, and that's how many hydrogen atoms there are. The numbers are bizarre, And I always say, like, so if you have, and we talked a little bit about this, electrolytic cells, typically are, a single phase system.
So we're talking about like ionizers on people's countertops, just electrolysis,
exactly,
splitting water apart with electricity.
Yeah, and you'll see it creating bubbles.
Right.
Okay, so and those are hydrogen bubbles typically. Those hydrogen bubbles, because you can see them, they're dissipating very quickly, and they always go from the bottom to the top. So yeah, you're going to lose most of the hydrogen that you produce. So those are not really effective systems. But if I break those hydrogens apart, okay, using a dual phase technology, and I create what are called nanobubbles. Well, these ones you can't see. And then what happens, think of a glass of water, at the bottom, of that water, you've got gravity creating weight, and you got the density of the water, holding things in place. Well, when I do things at the nano level instead of the micro level, then we've gone down many exponents. But now the weight of the hydrogen, okay, creating these nanobubbles, it can't overcome the downward pressure of the water. So that's now staying in solution, and it'll stay there for years in solution. So you can take your, you can take your time drinking that water. But the interesting part is on this structured water as well, or balanced water, is the fact that as it's touching, because it has polarity, okay, and the polarity is usually opposite to the walls that hold things in, like a glass of water, will have it. It has polarity, and it's going to be the reverse of the polarity of the water. So what'll happen is you'll have these, these what are called exclusion zones sitting. So the water with the minerals in it aren't making physical contact with the outer wall. It's another way to fix, like, water softeners. I mean, because you will not get calcium carbonate buildup, if the water is functionalized properly, because none of the minerals can make contact with the surface.
Is structured water also how our bodies store water? I think Gerald Pollack discovered this a while ago, right? H3O2, sort of the structured water and the exclusion zone, how it creates a battery of energy store and keeps any contaminants out of the actual battery.
Yeah, the energy, I mean, you can measure the energy, but and it's something we do down in Florida at our facility, is that because you're looking at how long does this stuff last, and we actually made a nasal spray, because dealing with the human body, most of what's going to cause you to get sick is breathing in toxins.
Right.
And I always tell people, we brush our teeth every day, at least once, maybe 2-3 times, keeping those teeth clean. It's like, interesting. How often do you clean your nose? Yeah, virtually never. It's like, and then you wonder why you get colds and flus. It's because all you need to do is clean it. And so we created a nasal spray, because I don't like my people getting sick. So I created a nasal spray, and what we have in that is ozone, hydrogen peroxide, and free chlorine, all trapped in functional water. We left it in sunlight, open top, for 2 years, and the energy level didn't change. Bizarre.
Yeah.
Bizarre. We're sitting there going, that's not even, You read all the chemical books. What we did is not even possible.
Hmm.
And that's at a pH of 7.6.
Wow.
I mean, it's which is exactly the pH of the nasal cavity. So when you spray it in, there's no burning sensation or anything like that. Where I started out doing hyperchlorous,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that at a pH of 5.8. And I got to tell you, at 5.8, you spray that in your nose. If you've ever had a brain freeze from eating ice cream too fast,
Oh yeah.
yeah, it's a brain freeze on steroids.
I do 2.5, and it's not. You get used to it because I
You
do
get
the
used,
saline wash, but it's not the most pleasant thing, but it's highly effective.
super effective, but man,
Yeah,
don't give it to your kids; they'll
for
hate you.
sure. Yeah, we've nebulized it before, but yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
not. It's not. You definitely feel something for sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, like you said, it works.
yeah.
So when COVID was running around, I was still traveling, so I'm spraying that in my nose 3 or 4 times a day.
Yeah, highly
But
preventative.
now I've got this replacement technology out there, and that's quite effective, and I'm working on making it more effective by um, allowing the passage to, if I can take this and generate a gas. So you put
Mhm.
a solution in the nasal cavity, especially right near the nares, and it'll penetrate all the skin levels. And then for like the next, 12 to 24 hours, it'll emit a gas, and that gas will destroy bacteria
Oh, interesting.
and viruses.
The rise of therapeutic gases is very interesting to write. So, molecular hydrogen, you're talking about, there's ozone now. So there's all of these. We're just going to go down to the fundamentals of these elements and apply them in large doses to the human body, and they have pretty miraculous effects.
Yeah, I think we're finding out. I always say that and if you looked at analytical chemistry and what it's done, through the years, and where it's going. I mean, turn the clock 50 years ago. I mean, we couldn't see anything,
Right.
so we couldn't see it certainly at the molecular level. And all of a sudden, we created, uh, you know, electron microscopes, and all of a sudden, we could actually see a water molecule. You can now see bacteria. You can see virus. These kinds of things, and it's opening up people's eyes. And we're now using graphene sheets to be able to see certain, like molecules, like real time, and how they behave. And it's mind blowing because everything you thought you knew turns out to be wrong. And
Yeah.
so your basic foundation is shattered, which means you have to start rebuilding it,
Right.
and that's why I said earlier, it's like you find out how little you know, the more you go deep.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of the difference between like Newtonian physics and then quantum physics or quantum mechanics. And you're like, this is completely different. Like everything should have a tag after, which is as far as we know. Like whenever there's
Exactly.
consensus science, I'm like, yeah, as of now, like
Yeah.
it can change next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it will.
Right.
That's the thing that's fascinating. It's coming. Somebody's going to see a little further. We still think atoms are small, and we already know. Atoms are made up of things too.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, even in human like physiology and just in studying metabolism, when I was in high school, the biology class I took was just like, hey, this is how metabolism works. And
yeah.
and as you read the literature, you're like, we still don't know how metabolism works.
No, it's crazy.
I thought this was figured out when I was in high school, and it wasn't. We're just like these huge problems are still problems, and we're just getting more clever with the solutions, but we're also inventing more intricate problems to solve in doing it. Like you said, you were doing work with, was his name Slovak, the gentleman who brought over RO
Robert
tech?
Slovak. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you go into some of the like more the theoretical or like edge remediation things you're working on with, private chemicals remediating and all of that type of stuff?
So I'm always looking at more effective ways to do things, because and Robert is, he's brilliant. I call him, one of the fathers of reverse osmosis. When somebody thought about it that far back,
Mm.
that's brilliance. But even Robert, started off, let's take on water, and had done that probably 20, 25 years before it was like, wait a minute, we should have this healthy water. And all of a sudden he's working with saline solutions, and that are actually healthy for you. Because you don't inject when you go to the hospital. They never hydrate you with DI water.
Right.
They use a saline solution.
Yeah.
Wonder why? Oh, it's conductive.
Yeah.
Your cells can actually hydrate with that water. So it's really interesting. I am certain that we'll have a replacement for RO. That's a non-waste methodology, straight one single pass system,
Mhm.
and inexpensive, low energy. I mean, it's sort of like when you sit down with a bunch of smart people, like a Slovak, you put them all in a room and say, "Here's our design criteria. I want you to forget what you developed before, but keep the knowledge that you used in developing those things. Let's fix this problem, and here and lay it out." And, you put that, these kind of people in a room, and it's amazing what comes out of them.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a couple of microbiologists. It's like Robert deals with these guys from Russia that came over with the deuterium depleted water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, whoa, geez, who knew?
Right.
Who knew deuterium even, was increasing in our, in water globally and causing health effects?
Can you explain deuterium briefly?
Yeah, well, in essence, it's heavy water. You find out you actually have 3 different hydrogen atoms. One with without a neutron, and a proton, another with one with an extra electron. He's going, how can this possibly be? This is not what I learned in my chemistry class.
Right.
Hydrogen was all by itself, all lonesome on the top left side of the periodic table. Don't mess with me. It's just like, God. So that's and if you go to I forget the name of the company that has the deuterium depleted water. But if you go to their website and read some of the research papers that these guys are writing, fascinating. I mean, it's like off the top fascinating. Just sort of like when you first discovered, molecular hydrogen.
Yeah, it looked like it had an antioxidant effect.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. But the heavy water, apparently, if you think of, and this is kind of an explanation early on, that we were describing, what happens when high deuterium or heavy water comes into a cell. Okay, so your mitochondria are actually rotating. They spin, and they spin at a very high RPM. Okay, so all of a sudden, this heavy water comes in, and it slows the spin down.
Oh, wow.
So you can't produce enough energy. But it also, that's a designed cell. It needs to operate at a certain RPM. If it slows down, it wobbles. As it wobbles, it kills the cell. So that's essentially the negative aspect of deuterium in water or heavy water. It's a great way of executing people with nobody being able to figure out how you did it.
All right, so I didn't know that part. So now the logical question is, how do you get light water, so to speak? How do you get the deuterium out?
So interesting, the discovery, reading through their stuff, they discovered, Russia was, banning people to Siberia and then wondering why they lived to be 110,
Cold exposure?
And they thought, oh, it must be the cold. It's like, no, because in Maine, they don't live to be 110.
Well, that's true. Maniacs. Yeah.
So, well, it turns out that water freezes at a different rate of speed based on how heavy it is.
Mhm.
So what freezes at the top is the lighter water. And that's what these people are drinking when they melt snow.
Mm.
It's deuterium depleted. And it's like, interesting. So now they're making this using a distillation process. Because again, when you distill water via heat, what turns into steam first is the lighter water.
Mm.
The heavier water takes a little bit more time. So they bring it up to temperature, take that steam, and that's depleted. The remaining stuff, recycle it.
So I'm assuming this isn't just distilled water that you would buy at a store.
No, that is
Okay.
not deuterium depleted.
Okay. I just wanted to check because a
Yeah,
lot of people do distilled water fasts. And I was like, I
yeah,
don't actually know if that's good or not. Because
yeah,
I hadn't done it that way because I'm a big mineral person. I was like, I can't actually wrap my mind around what this would do inside your body.
yeah. Well, that's let's see, who are these guys? I should remember this name too. There's a group out of Denver, Colorado, and when you want to know, because when you start, people that do this distillation process are trying to evacuate the toxins out of their body.
Right.
It's like when you evacuate toxins, you really have to know what you're doing
Yeah.
because you can kill yourself
That's
pretty
what
rapid.
I watch it happen on social media. I mean, detox fads are always a thing, and
Yep,
I'm more on the food side. I'm like, I don't have to do a protocol. Just stop poisoning yourself, and your body will do it. But when I see people do it like quickly,
yep,
it doesn't look good. Like
no,
it looks like people feel like they're dying.
yep.
Yeah.
No, you really have to know what you're doing. It's a very dangerous protocol, and God, what's this name of the amalgam? There's another name for mercury.
Oh, gotcha. Well, that's actually one of my. I have three fillings still from when I was a cavity, and they're still doing mercury. And I found a holistic dentist in Asheville before the
Yep,
hurricane hit, and I had it scheduled to get them removed because I'm like, I really need to get rid of these. But and then the hurricane hit, and I moved. So I'm
yep.
uh still a little hesitant because I just don't want them to touch it. I was like the risk of it just moving. And maybe you probably be the person to ask about this since you had the career in it, but what do you suggest for people who have mercury filling still? Like, what's the best protocol? Like, should you just leave it or just nope, get them out and then have like a protocol around it?
Well, being logical, I'd say if you're, 65 years old, it's like
Right.
it doesn't make a difference.
Just leave it.
Damage done,
Nope.
because it takes time. Younger than that, you have to go to a dentist that knows what they're
Right.
doing.
I know.
They should have a vacuum system that's sucking the vapor because mercury has such a low vapor pressure,
Mhm.
and a filling is 50 to 53% mercury.
Right.
Okay, and there's almost no silver in it, even though we call them silver fillings. Most of them are copper, and the American Dental Association, I believe, still has a patent on an amalgam that includes copper.
Mhm.
And the problem with using copper over silver, they used to use silver, but fillings got too expensive, so they went to copper.
Yeah.
The problem with copper is it magnifies by threefold the damage done by mercury.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a serious issue. Um, I'd have my fillings replaced by a dentist that you make sure they're like air sucking because
Yeah.
you're going to be creating mercury vapor. The swallowing of the actually swallowing little things of mercury in that amalgam, not problematic at all.
Yeah. It's the breathing. Yeah.
Yep, yep, it's the breathing side
Yeah,
of it.
they had that system, so I probably won't risk it. I'll go back up and do it in Nashville. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Good to know. Sorry to pull us off. I forgot
not a
where you were
problem.
going from that. One thing I did want to touch on, and I had this written down in the corner of my notebook, was your morning protocol for your water and sort of the sulfur hydro pathways that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What are those involved in? Are those signaling for your entire nervous system? Like, why do you focus on that pathway?
So all your cell signaling, that's going on are going the pathways. We always talk about these pathways, and it's
Yeah.
like, well, it's not like air or just plain old water that these pathways are. These electrical signals are going on. They're all sulfur pathways.
Hmm.
There's if you go, probably the best articles I've ever seen, including some videos on it, are from a Dr. Boyd Haley, and I think he was with the University. I forget the name of it. It was in Alabama, and he's probably, to me, one of the best, mercury guys out there in terms of toxicity. But he's got videos of what happens to a pathway, and what you see is a cell looks like a thread, with a sort of an electrical signal across it, going up and down, and it's all white. Okay, and it's a sulfhydryl pathway. So what happens is, if mercury comes in, because sulfhydryl, mercury and sulfur love each other, so they chelate and create a bond, and that means in between the pathway and that bond, that it can't, an electrical signal will no longer pass through that mercury agglomeration. So I got to get rid of that or create a new pathway. So your body only has so much sulfur to rebuild pathways, but and it's the Japanese have done this research, using food that's starting to decay starts to give off sulfur, and that species of sulfur, if it's encapsulated, so you don't taste this god awful taste.
Yeah, sulfur's not pleasant.
Yeah, you just want to get it into the system. And again, these are all things, don't go out and start, eating tablespoons of sulfur every day, because everything has a balance,
Right.
But you will start rebuilding those pathways. And that's important, because your cell signaling starts to come back, which means your immune system starts to come back. Mitochondria starts producing more energy. I mean, everything, the balance of your machine, called the human body, starts to get more and more normalized again.
The importance of sulfur escaped me until probably a year ago. And I was just like, oh, wait, this is used as a building block for like all of our endogenous detox, like glutathione, all these heavy hitters and cruciferous vegetables have it, the fermentation of that, all the traditional cultures did it. Like, it always comes back to some big, like, real food fermentation, the things that people have been doing forever on the food side. But I think what biohacking has said is we might need to do these a little more accelerated due to the toxic load that we have today.
It's sort of like, a real simple way is you can buy pickles at the store, and most of them are in, kind of these sweetened solutions, but you can buy ones that are in beginning the fermentation process, so they're all natural. And just eat pickles.
Yeah, I do every day. I just love pickles. But
they're super good for you, and that fermentation, that's the sulfur side of it. That is wonderful for cells.
Yeah, and I think that's what most of the healing, like, I'm into a lot of healing modalities, and there's the energetic side, and there's the, like, PEMF mats are awesome. Anything with modulating vibration and photobiochemicals, or like red light therapy. But the thing I always come back to is water, because it's either the biggest conduit for toxicity, and then you get rid of that, and then you can actually accelerate the normal process of regeneration and repair. So for like a big picture overview, since this was a ton of information, which I appreciate, what's your, like, basic step pathway for water? Like, first, make sure you're not doing this, and then if you want to get creative and start looking for more energy and more healing, do this. Like, what do you usually tell people?
So first thing is, like, we have to be logical. I can't give everybody, molecular hydrogen water in showers and every faucet in the house. It's way too expensive.
Right.
Even to take like a single tub and make a tub like a healing tub, it's going to run $100,000. So how many people can afford that? You know, and if you're paying less than that, I guarantee you, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's cutting corners, and it's just not a very viable place. It's like you can't just throw hydrogen or bubble oxygen in water and expect great results.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be in the water, not bubbling. You know, mm-hmm. So it's in essence mimicking dissolved in the water. But it's like first off, it's simple: get the toxins out of the water. You know, if you really want to get health. So let's get the toxins out of the water. So we've got water that's free of toxins, but not free of minerals.
Right.
So that's step one. Then step two, along with that, and that has nothing to do with what I develop or sell, is work your buns off trying to get food that's not processed.
Yeah.
Because water is a carrier. It's a great carrier of everything, moving it from point A to point B. So it's like, I only want to carry stuff that's really healthy for my cells. So eat good food. I know it's a pain and it's so hard to shop for good food, but do it. It'll help you like you can't believe. The next phase of water, again, to be kind of logical, is to, I'd start off having hydrogen water. I think molecular hydrogen water, and you can produce, like a tabletop system.
Mm-hmm.
Just drink it.
Yeah.
And that's, and you can't overdose on hydrogen.
Right.
So it's like, you can use it as your water that you hydrate from. If it's a good system, you can carry it around with you in a water bottle, no problem. So, that's kind of my second phase. The third phase that's coming is what I call healing water. So that's water that, has the very likely potential of starting reversing diseases, that are immunodeficient based response, and start rebuilding cells so your body can resume its health again. And I refer to that sort of the next phase of water that's coming, and it's coming fast.
Which is good. That's really good to hear, because it can be overwhelming just looking at the breadth of issues hitting water. So it's nice to hear from someone who's actually in the process and talking with everyone that it's coming quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will look forward to the systems, because I don't think they're it should be an easy, affordable household thing. Like,
yep.
Clean, regenerative water shouldn't be a luxurious thing. It's kind of the foundation of everything. So it'd be great if it was just like a dishwasher or like a fridge, and just an appliance in the house that everyone had access to, or that was on like in a public library or a rec center, something that was just widely available, because the toxic load isn't getting any better.
No.
Yeah.
No, and as you pointed out, PFAS has just become these forever chemicals. It's kind of a new thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, where have you guys been? I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, this stuff is, these are all volatile organic compounds that we've known about for decades. And they all have, if you do toxicology searches on any one of them, and you're talking 10,000 of them,
right,
you'll find that we've known they've been toxic for years.
Yeah.
And it's just like, but nobody's getting sick. And it's like, well, yeah, they are. They're dying younger, and they're getting all these, immuno-based diseases that essentially didn't exist. And now they're off the charts. So, get that stuff out of your water, get that toxin out. And like you said, do things reasonably. It's sort of like doing a whole house RO. Hey, if you want to spend $25,000, have fun.
Well, that's why I like your system. It's affordable. Yeah. Yeah. That was a huge wealth, and I appreciate the simplistic protocol, and I do at least two of those things myself, so I'm happy that I'm on the
Yeah,
right
that's
track.
great.
But it makes a difference. I mean, just if you start your day with something, starting your day with clean mineral water for one, and then if you're able to
Yep,
add molecular hydrogen, it makes a world of difference just in your metabolism and in my like mental health and
yep,
just all aspects instead of just like I call coffee or caffeine just anxiety juice. I'm still addicted to it, but
yep.
there's enough practitioners who have gotten on the boat of, hey, drink a glass of mineral water before you do your coffee. It makes a dramatic difference.
It
And it
does.
really does. Yeah.
Yep.
So I
Well, it's
appreciate
just
that.
like, for those of us that partake and end up waking up kind of brain fogged because of
Mm,
alcohol, do a little hydrogen water.
yeah.
You'd be surprised at how fast your brain clears up.
Hmm.
Fascinating.
Yeah. A little bit of dehydration in the brain is felt
Yep,
dramatically. I think it was like 1% turns into 20%.
yep,
Your perception of cognitive function, like 1% dehydration magnifies quite quickly.
yep.
Yeah. Anything that we missed that you wanted to mention before I let you go? I really appreciate all the time you spent.
Nope, nope. I think we got it covered.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for your time again. And I will, as I hear updates on all the exciting things, if you have any, I would love to broadcast them. But I will continue my journey into water and look forward to talking again.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, all.
Take care. Bye
Bye.
bye.
I hope you found that as impactful, empowering, and valuable as I did. Below this video, you find a link. If you want to know more about what's in your water, if you may need some help deciphering everything or even figuring out where to start, use the link. They'll take you to a very brief form, take 10 or 20 seconds, has a couple questions on what area of clean, healthy water you're interested in, if you just want to get rid of the toxins in your water, or if you're more interested in the hydrogen, molecular hydrogen, and the health impacting areas. We'll figure it out together and make a digestible roadmap for you and your family. Thanks for listening, everyone.